We are only 5 years away until 2030, and the Sustainable Development Goals overall are not really on a good track. Only 35% of targets are on track, and developing countries are still suffering from slow economic growth and debt. How is the issue of financing, and how is that being addressed to help some of these countries accelerate and make quicker, faster progress to try to meet that goal?
The state of sustainable development is not ideal, right? You mentioned only 35% of the SDGs are either on track or having modest, progress, which in reality means that 1 in every 5 people is still living in poverty, right? And 2.5 billion people in the world, almost 1 in 3, right, do not have internet access, right? So the challenges are really serious, right? One of the reasons for this is the lack of financing for development. But this issue has to be looked at very carefully. Right? When we say that developing countries has about $4 trillion a year financing gap for sustainable development goals, developing countries in 2024 paid $1.17 trillion just for debt servicing, right? Just to pay the interest. Right? So when you have this kind of financing gap, you really have to look at the priorities, where you spend limited public resources. Right? How do you create the kind of fiscal space to invest in areas that are most effective, right, for maintaining and increasing your human resource capacity, right? That is linked to productivity, for example, right? How do you ensure you have a safety net, right, that provides security to population that are vulnerable, right? But how do you, carve out enough space to invest in health, education, infrastructure that creates conditions, for growth, right? So how do you work with the private sector to generate the financial return, but also, be supportive of your national development objectives? For example, to invest in green economic transitions, right? In renewable energy, right? In other areas that really are important for the country's economic future. Right? So there are a lot of issues that we need to look at. It's a really complex discussion.
China is an important development partner for many countries around the world, especially in trade and investment. It's also a key leader. You mentioned green technology a moment ago. How does UNDP see China's role in helping accelerate sustainable development?
China, has achieved a lot, right, in its own, development, effort. Again, over the last 45 years, right, since China opened up, the GDP per capita really has grown by 100 times. Right? That is phenomenal. Right? They've lifted, I think now more than 800 million people out of poverty. Right? And China is now the second largest economy in the world, and so forth. But China, of course, still has a lot of development challenges. Right? The Chinese government, recognizes that. They're using their 5-year planning instrument, right, to, address these remaining challenges. So I think, the government wants to focus more and more on, quality development, right, quality of life, issues. So I think, UNDP can continue to play that role, right, to work with our governments, to be a, second opinion provider, probably, because the government of China is very capable, right, in looking at their strategies. But I think we can, be a second opinion provider, right, be a source of consultation, right, and bring international experience and practices, right, to help.
China is also one of the global leaders when it comes to artificial intelligence, and because this technology has been changing so rapidly, I'd like to get your thoughts on AI, if it can help bridge the digital divide, and how UNDP is working with it.
When I think of AI, generally I think about like 2 types of artificial intelligence applications. One is the big AI, right? You have large language modules, right? You create something that are fundamental, right, to this technology, right? that can really, be the source of, many other applications, right? But they also have what people call this small AI, right? Use these tools that big AI provides, right, in specific applications to solve problems, right? For example, now it is quite mature, application that you can use AI, imagery, right, to look at certain, diseases, in crops, right, and identify, this disease and then apply associated treatment, for example, right? There are also, apps that have been developed to monitor wildfires in the forests, for example, right? Combining images from the space, right, with the local sensors, right, with the drone imagery and the local on-the-ground sensors, for example. You have, AI applications that can help treat the diseases, in remote areas more effectively. I think for us, it is really probably, we see more opportunity for us to be engaged in this, the second part of this application, right? Using AI for good, right? To really, achieve, benefits for the, broader population, right? Using AI, as a technique. In this regard, it's really important, that we work with our governments on building this so-called digital public infrastructure, right? The fundamental structures, data, right? Information safeguards, human rights safeguards, right? So that, the AI can really be used safely, right? For the benefit of, development.
China has started to play a more active role in the United Nations system over the past few decades. Overall, how do you view China's contributions when it comes to peacekeeping, development, and global governance within the UN's framework?
China, as I mentioned, right, they have really, achieved a lot, in their own domestic development. But China has also been and consistently been a supporter of South-South cooperation, right? Because the China-South-South cooperation started decades ago, right? But now has moved to a higher level. A few days ago, in the UN, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of China's Peace and Development Fund. I think more than 100 countries, have benefited from the funding support, from this facility, right? And China, I think 7 years ago established the China International Development Cooperation Agency, CITCA, right? And through that, program and the South-South, fund, again, large number of developing countries, have received the support that they otherwise would not receive, right? UNDP has collaborated with the Chinese government, including CITCA, and to support many developing countries. Last year, we agreed on a package of support to help 10 developing countries to, establish this early warning system, right, to deal with weather-related climate change, early warning, and so forth. So I think this, support has become more and more important. In this, 80th General Assembly, right, we expect that the Chinese government, right, will announce a joint collaboration with UNDP to establish a global center for sustainable development in Shanghai, using China's ecosystem and the capacity, right, and using UNDP's, global platform to support the developing countries to speed up, their, green, economic transition. So I think, we look forward to this kind of collaboration more, in the future. Yeah.
Acting Administrator Haoliang Xu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, for this opportunity. Thank you.